I want to tell you a story. And it's a story that I have shared with very few people, not for any other reason that I just really enjoyed holding the story close to me. I think most of us have experiences that we just like to kind of hold close until it's time to be shared. Many people know that about 3 years ago, I completely destroyed my left knee. I shredded anything that's in there, the ACL, the menisci, I don't know what else, but other things that sound expensive. The surgeon told me that there wasn't much inside that could actually be repaired, but she would do her best. And I knew what that meant. Put me under, I knew I was going to come out with nothing repaired. And that I would eventually need a knee replacement, but I was a little young for that conversation right now. And we'd see what we could do to sort of push that forward. So I started physical therapy. And a couple months into physical therapy, my therapist introduced me. He wanted to add some weight bearing exercises to, strengthen everything around the knee. It's squirrel moment. You'd be amazed how much you need your butt for everything. So strengthening the butt and the glutes and the thighs and the hamstring, and a lot more things that sound expensive. But he introduced me to weight bearing exercises, which very quickly became, he introduced me to deadlifting. And which, of course, the only thing I know about it is TV shows, right? Strongman, Arnold Schwarzenegger, women that have no neck, pretty stereotypical things. But he set up the bar and some weights, and I had no idea how much it was, and he showed me how you do it, and I practiced a few times with just the bar so that my body, I could get some body memory going on. And then he put some weights on the bar and told me to do a few of those, and so I did. And it wasn't really difficult. It was, I don't know that I should say easy, but it came very naturally. And that he asked me afterwards, the last thing we do is ice my knee. And so, I'm sitting on the table, he's wrapping up my knee with some ice, and he asked me how much I thought it was. And I'm like, I don't know, 40 pounds, maybe, 50 at the most. And he said, no, that was 90 pounds. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, really? 90 pounds? I don't even know how to translate that in my brain. And apparently that was kind of unusual, because everyone in there, at that time, most all the physical therapists were men, and they were very impressed. I wasn't, because I didn't have anything to compare it to, and I really didn't know what was happening, except I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought, well, how come somebody didn't tell me about this 40 years ago? Because it was that, I've done the cardio thing, and every time I get on a treadmill or a bike, for my whole life, I get on a treadmill and I start going, and I'm like, where the fuck am I going? I'm not going anywhere. And it just never really resonated. And I'm not somebody who can keep doing something just because you're supposed to. I understand all the benefits of cardio, and there's a reason I never stuck with it. But this just was a whole new world. And looking back at my life, there were certainly some clues. I had gotten teased when I was a kid about being a pack mule because I could carry so much. Even as an adult, going through the airport with girlfriends and, here, give me your bags, and I'm carrying multiple bags. And, the pack mule joke, which nobody really thought was a compliment, and least of all me. I didn't. It was just something that I got used to. I've been overweight my whole life, and apparently, freakishly strong as well. So I'm sitting there having my knee iced, and my physical therapist is telling me how much, and then he looked at me and he said, what you did today was really amazing. And me, of course, being a good girl, I'm like, okay, thanks. Yeah, great. And I was just quiet. Someone gives you a compliment and you're supposed to respond. And then he leaned in a little bit and he said it again. And I replied the same way again. I think most of us have learned to respond when someone says something kind. You smile and you nod, but it hasn't quite sunk in. But it's not like you don't mean the thank you; it just hasn't really registered. And so I just said, "Yeah, thanks, cool." And then he leaned in a little bit closer and he said, "No, really, you're very good at this." So I was quiet, but I thanked him again. And then he said something I'll never forget. If this had been 30 years ago, I would have gotten you into Olympic training. And I'm like, holy fuck, really? So I just stared at him. If you want to make Kelly be quiet, say things like that. And then he said, your body was perfectly designed for this. Your body was perfectly designed for this. And that was it. I just started crying because nobody ever in my whole life said anything like that about my body. Not after abuse, not after trauma, not after years of carrying all this extra weight, not after decades of feeling like my body was something to fix, to fight against, to manage, to shrink, to apologize for. Yes, apologize for. My body had always simply seemed useful for surviving. But strength, power, capacity, being perfectly designed for something, not so much. And then here's this man, he was 27 or something. He looked at the same body that I had spent years doubting and said again, your body was perfectly designed for this. And you know what? I discovered that I believed him. I believed him. So here we are 3 years later, and I'm deadlifting 290 pounds. That's right. You heard me right. 290 pounds. Not because I'm chasing records, not because I'm trying to prove anything, but simply because I love it. There's great joy in it. And I know that sounds crazy to a lot of people. And, I'm sure there's things you do that are very meaningful with joy that I would go, yeah, I don't get it. So I figure we're even. And on June 20th, I'll walk into my first powerlifting competition. I decided to enter the competition, not for the competing. I mean, I'm just always competing with myself, and it still feels pretty surreal. My mom died in November, and what I had really wanted to do, and I tried to do before she died, was to get into a competition so she could see it. And just didn't work out that way. But she was my biggest fan, and because she knew how I felt about my body. She knew the power of that statement of your body was perfectly designed for this. She got it. She knew what that meant for me. So it does feel surreal. In fact, before I left in the beginning of November, for the last year, I had been tallying up how much weight I lifted in a month. Not for any other reason than to just tally the numbers. I've always told my weight trainer and my physical therapist, don't tell me how much I'm lifting. I'm just lifting a bar. And, but by, this past September, October, I was lifting a little over 200,000 pounds a month. And I gotta tell you, I don't know how to wrap my brain around that. So I don't really try anymore. But my body was perfectly designed for that. So the biggest thing that changed wasn't my knee at all. It was the story that I carried about my body. And maybe somebody's aren't broken like mine. Maybe it's not broken. Maybe they've just never been witnessed accurately. Right? Maybe my body, and somebody's, probably yours, has never been broken. It's not broken now. Maybe they've simply never been witnessed accurately.